Blade Runner 2049 is in my opinion the best film of the whole of the last decade. There was a lot of brilliant competition, but in terms of the most electrifying cinematic experience I've had in the 2010s, Blade Runner 2049 holds the crown. So yes, this video is on my own opinion, and unfortunately I will be spoiling a lot of this movie, as I explain why Blade Runner 2049 is a masterpiece. The original Blade Runner released in 1982, so obviously it was before I was born. However, I knew about its cult status, and most people in my parents' generation saw it as an all-time classic. And well, it is! The world and themes were so creatively and intricately crafted by Ridley Scott, Hampton Fancher, and so many others, to the point where it just stuck in the heads of so many for so long. 35 years later, and I'm glad to say that the film's writers, Hampton Fancher and Michael Green, paid the original a lot of respect. It would have been so easy to make Blade Runner 2 or Blade Runner again, as it most likely would have been, but instead they're really focused on doing something new by building off its predecessor. Rick Deckard is not the main character, the plot is not the same, and the world is very different from when we last saw it. This is because, funnily enough, in the last 30 canonical years, a lot has changed, which leads to a lot of new rich world building and some new concepts and themes to be introduced. From this, they can just tell basically their own story only using the backdrop of the original Blade Runner. And the way that they explain this history feels really organic too. They had several prequel shorts that tell small portions of the story. They're for the most part only there for the history and to add to the world and its characters. But with this, they're able to tell a whole new story with a whole new characters. And it's a choice that was just so refreshing, because so many Hollywood writers would fall into the trap of trying to be the first Blade Runner. Not trying to be like the first Blade Runner, but just trying to be it. 2049 is able to make such a statement by fitting in very well to the franchise, whilst also crafting a unique identity for itself. It acknowledges and embraces the past, while also giving us a lot of new stuff to offer. The last thing I want to mention is that the film doesn't linger on references. This is another common trope that you see in sequels, and it is a pet peeve of mine, because they'll effectively take the story to a halt in order to have a couple of throwaway lines, characters, or even scenes dedicated to just farming our nostalgia. But this film never feels like it's pandering to your built-in nostalgia or on your attachment to the original. It just mimics the style and the feel, and it does its own thing from there. All the film wants to do is it wants you to remember the ideas from the first film and pay attention as this new installment builds on its predecessor. All of the characters in this movie are great. Our protagonist is Kay, who is a replicant that throughout the course of the film grows to believe that he is something special, only to have the crushing revelation that he's nothing special. Yet despite that difference, he still tries and succeeds at making a difference in the long run. This is a really great character arc that's really well developed thanks to some great dialogue and just the right amount of info being given at the right time. This kind of role is perfect for Ryan Gosling, whose physicality and broodiness really complement the kind of character they're going for. We see this character's journey with the right amount of progression. We're shown his home, what his life's like, what his goals are, and what other people think about him. In reality, Kay, the replicant Blade Runner, is not too different from any of us in terms of his aspirations and goals, which is why it makes him such an interesting protagonist. He's so different yet so similar as well. Despite all of his differences, we can still relate to him in this dystopian future, and it's because the writing and acting took their time up building his arc and his character. Then we get to Joy, who contributes a lot to what Kay's arc is. She's basically designed to be the perfect girlfriend in this story. She listens to Kay's inner workings, allowing for us to get to know Kay better. She also helps speed up the plot at some points and even can metaphorically represent Kay's stability. Conceptually, they do a lot with Joy as well, making for some fantastic scenes, which is why when she dies, we feel the loss and we see and understand Kay breaking down due to the loss. So when the revelation comes that she never really did love Kay, and that like a good machine, she only ever said and did what she had to say, This is a concept that I don't think I have seen in sci-fi before, but it was a brilliant idea, and all of a sudden the slower scenes now have so much more weight and more of an impact. I really love the Kay-Joy dynamic and how it affects Kay's arc. Spoilers again, but when he dies at the end, I felt sad, yet also really satisfied. Everything built up and paid off so well that I never questioned my investment in Kay. For a new character, he was handled very well, which is when I move on to Rick Deckard. Deckard was the protagonist of Blade Runner, so the choice not to make him the protagonist of this was actually pretty smart. Deckard isn't actually in much of the film, which honestly is a good thing. This allows the ambiguity of whether Deckard is a replicant or not to continue, as well as keeping the ending of both cuts still feeling right. Harrison Ford gave a really good performance that, in the limited screen time he had, still shone through. It's clear that this is the same character we got to know in the first Blade Runner, but he's also now lived his life, and seeing this version of Deckard felt so saddening, but it also felt pretty interesting when he's giving this new hope. He basically represents the first film as a whole. He's there, being used a decent amount, but there's new stuff that's taking precedent and it's taking more focus. But each end is still complementing the other, just like Deckard's and Kay's arc complement each other. 2049 affirms the importance of the original, whilst the original acts as a big stepping stone. This is where our final piece of the puzzle comes in with Wallace and Love. So Neander Wallace is the main antagonist of the film. Or is he? Okay, yeah, he is. For starters, Wallace really blurs the line between replicant and human to the point where I actually had to Google what he was. And thanks to some great design and a pretty good performance from Jared Leto, Wallace is just basically a mad businessman who wants to monopolize and control everything, which is quite relevant in today's culture. This obsession with controlling every secret passes on to Love. Love is basically obsessed with following Wallace's orders no matter what it takes, but because she's a replicant, she lacks the nuance that this character does. The intensity that Sylvia Hoeks exudes makes her an intimidating presence, and you're genuinely fearful of what she'll do next. The game of cat and mouse had real stakes, and whilst the villains weren't the focus of the film, the themes that they sent were clear and they always had a strong and meaningful presence in the story. As for the rest of the supporting cast, well, they were all great. No one overstays their welcome, all of the performances are great, and each character is distinct enough to represent another part of this world. In particular, I really liked Robin Wright, Mackenzie Davis, and Lenny James, and even Dave Bautista showed that he's actually got some pretty good acting chops. I also want to say that I'm glad that they didn't have too many recurring characters here. Deckard was used excellently, and the cameos that both Gaff and Rachel made a lot of sense, as nice little nods for moving the plot forward. Props go to Denis Villeneuve, the director, for handling these characters so well as the actors and the writers too, of course. This is one of the best looking films, visually, I have seen ever. Like I mentioned, top credit goes to Denis Villeneuve's incredible directing, which keeps so distinctly similar to the feel of the original. He's able to envision a lot of atmosphere to this world, which is of course helped by the amazing CGI. The cities, ships, robots, and so much more look really convincing and provide such good visual splendor. But as well as that, so many more things than you'd realise were CG. It all holds up upon multiple re-watches at crisp quality, but better than that, so many little things. Like Joy's transparency allow for some great artistry, but it also shows how much effort went into the visuals. Speaking of which, of course I can't leave out the cinematography, because being completely honest, this is the best cinematography I have ever seen in a film. It is a testament to Roger Deakins' flawless work here, that so many screen caps from the film have been used as my desktop background, or even my channel banner, for crying out loud. The use of colour and light is beautiful, and the way Deakins mixes framing between real and CG elements shows so much technical achievement. Honestly, there is no bad shot in this film. The lighting, camera work, and post-production just make this film look incredible. This is one hell of a visual splendor, and from a filmmaking point of view, it should absolutely be applauded. I've already praised Denis Villeneuve's fantastic vision for this film, and his direction was perfect for this kind of film, and that's because a lot of the technical aspects of this film are loving homages to the style that inspired a lot of the people working on this film to make films themselves. This is where some of the great editing by Joe Walker comes into play, as the film establishes such a consistent rhythm that was previously established by its predecessor. And this sort of pace, it's slower, it's a lot more thoughtful, and that's exactly what I feel modern films are lacking in right now. All the editing and post-production work is stellar, as is the production design, which really helps illustrate the kind of world that this film is set in. The sound design is great as well, and the music by Hans Zimmer and Benjamin Wallfisch is fantastic. It's a wonderful mix of Vangelis' original score and some of modern technology's music used in blockbusters today. I would highly recommend the soundtrack, as it hugely elevates a lot of the moments in the film. But what this all loops back to is it's got a great mix of old and new styles of filmmaking going on here. It's able to get the best of both worlds and craft a very unique identity for itself. It's abundantly clear that everyone involved in this film was passionate and committed to replicating, or replicanting, the feel of older sci-fi films like Blade Runner that inspired them all. Look, I'm sorry, I promise I'll never do a pun like that again. My point is, this film was very much about emulating an old style of film that had kind of gone away, which is, this finally brings back the techno-noir and the feel of it. Technically, this film is just so impressive because it's able to take a lot of the things that inspired it and do them again using today's technology and basically improve upon this old style of film. It's really admirable. Like I said, this film was a mix of old and new, as in it had two writers, one that worked on the first Blade Runner and one new writer. Because of this, the established style comes through. The pace in this is slower, it takes its time to build up atmosphere and tension, and as well as this, the writers never treat the audience like an idiot. The way information is conveyed is superb, and the rate it's given keeps satisfying us whilst also taking the right amount of time. It respects its audience, leaving us to put together the narrative threads, and it never wastes time reminding you information that you already knew. Every time a question is answered, a new one is asked, which keeps us on our toes. The plot itself follows Kay, who is slowly uncovering a mystery that love also wants answers, leading to a cat and mouse mystery film, with Blade Runner essentially being the backdrop. And this is done with all the scope and splendor you'd expect to see from a sci-fi film. New concepts like Joy's technology, replicants having children, and how memories are created were all breaths of fresh air to this universe, and the way that each narrative thread came together to the plot led to a really well-woven and satisfying narrative that closed in a logical manner, whilst also leaving itself open for the future. This leads us quite nicely into my final point on interesting themes. Blade Runner was really like nothing that came before it. It was a sci-fi film that actually deconstructed humanity's future and what it meant to be human. I'm glad to say that 2049 continues this trend. The themes of free will are by far the most prevalent ones in this film. It takes a look at what really the differences between replicants and humans are. The idea of replicants reproducing just blurs the line more, especially as in this world technology and control has seeped into everyday life so much to the point where there is practically no difference anymore. The freedom movement obviously wants replicant freedom, but in reality, the humans in this world are about as free as the replicants are, with only a few like Wallace controlling the masses. The difference is that people don't like replicants, whereas people do like humans. Both sides want to know who the replicant child is, and both will kill anyone to find their goals. This is why Kay's choice to save Deckard at the end is so powerful. He'd basically been led through the entire plot, and finally he made a choice of his own. not through picking a side, but through doing the right thing, which in the end was choosing neither side. This came right after he realised that Joy's love was manufactured for him. Did they ever love each other? It's hard to tell, isn't it? They were both programmed to love each other, but it was never their choice to be programmed. Ideas like these are fascinating to follow, and that's only the surface ones. I haven't mentioned the mass conglomeration, muddied sides, and the grim future, or even the morality of replicants. The point is, this film has a lot to say no matter which way you look at it and how. It doesn't lead you down a specific path, it rather just brings up questions and ideas that you're left thinking about long after watching. Blade Runner 2049 could have been a shallow sequel, but instead it was about so much more than just entertainment. So yeah, I love this movie. I really think that this film contains so much thought and effort to push it past being your run-of-the-mill sequel. It did such a good service to the original that it even surpassed the first Blade Runner in quality, in my opinion. Unfortunately, such is the way of ambitious sci-fi films like this, Blade Runner 2049 did not perform well at the box office. Because of this, a planned sequel was never made. However, the same could have been said for the original Blade Runner, which captured just the right number of people's imaginations to inspire them to make films like it one day. This film is critically beloved and has a cult following just like the first, so I'm sure someday the story will continue under the helm of someone inspired by 2049, who, like me, believes that this film is a masterpiece. But for now, I guess we'll just have to enjoy 2049 as it is. Thank you for watching. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe, like, and comment, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.